Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Optimize 2.0 release webinar. My name is Daya, and I'm going to be your moderator for this webinar. So part of my duties as the moderator is to introduce the two people who are going to be telling you about Optimize 2.0, and that is Jacob, our co-founder and CEO of Camunda, and Johannes, the tech lead of Optimize. Before we begin the webinar, just two housekeeping items to share with you. This webinar will be recorded, and we will be sending you the recording tomorrow via email. So no worries, you'll get the recording if you missed a couple things or want to share it with other people. And as well, you're more than welcome to ask us questions throughout the webinar. So to do that, there should be a question mark symbol on your screen. If you go ahead and click that, type in your question, we'll be able to answer any questions you have at the end of the webinar. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass the torch on to Jacob to get going.
Right. Thank you, Daya, and hi and welcome, everyone. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here together with Johannes, as Daya mentioned. So we are going to present Camunda Optimize 2.0 to you now. And this is a big step for us, really, because our initial version of combining workflow automation with big data, basically, is finally happening now. And the purpose of this little webinar is to introduce you first in the initial vision and motivation for Optimize from our side, the creators, but also to explain a bit under which circumstances Optimize might make sense for you to evaluate. So this is going to be the first part of this webinar. Then we are going to look at the features themselves, obviously, first on a rather high level. So this means that we want to see what's basically possible with Optimize, what it's good for, what I can do with it. And then, of course, take a deeper dive by looking at it and the live demo. And this is, in fact, the live demo. So I'm saying I'm excited. I'm always excited, both in a positive and negative way, so to say that, it's live. So you never know what's going to happen, but that makes it more real. So therefore, I'm very excited to present this, of course, to you now. Johannes is here to help me in case of technical questions that you might have. Also, it's always interesting to hear a bit from the engineers who actually built the product, what was the initial motivations or reasoning for certain architecture decisions, things like that. So this is why the two of us are going to do this today. After we have looked at the feature side, we have seen what's actually possible with Optimize in the live demo. We will also take a look ahead and see what's coming up on the product roadmap. So of course, 2.0 is not like the very last release of Optimize. So therefore, there's more to come, and we want you to be aware of that roadmap so that you can also, look ahead and see what you can expect from Optimize in the future. The next steps is really about what you can do yourself right away in terms of evaluating Optimize, how you can do that, under which circumstances in your own process automation endeavor life cycle, so to say, should you consider Optimize. So there's some context for you that is hopefully helpful, and also a concrete offer from our side how we can help you evaluating Optimize in your organization. So this is basically what you can expect from this webinar. There will be, of course, a Q&A session at the end, as Daya mentioned. So feel free to put your questions in the chat window, and we will answer them at the end, maybe even in between if the opportunity comes up. And really hope that this is going to be an informative session for you guys. All right, so let's jump right into it. So this is, of course, always an important thing. When we look at Optimize as a specific product, it is, of course, a building brick of a bigger picture. So we do have an overarching vision or mission at Camunda, which is about automation. So not just any automation, but specifically business process automation. Not just any business processes. There are many processes out there that you can automate using drag and drop tools, for example, point and click tools such as whatever, Zapier and things like that. So those are very valid approaches for the long tail, simple workflows that are often in the let's say, environment of a business that you need to look after. But for Camunda and our 200+ customers now, it's always about the very core business processes. So the workflows that actually execute your business model. And those workflows are, of course, very unique, very bespoke, and also rather complex. So you would not implement those using any point-and-click tool or low-code platform, but you actually entertain a certain workforce of qualified engineers and developers that leverage Camunda as an open and developer-friendly technology in order to implement those specific and bespoke business process automation solutions. So this is what Camunda in general is all about. We want to do this to the highest possible extent. So whatever can be automated should be automated using Camunda in your business. And when we're looking at Optimize coming from this vision, of course, the question is, okay, which contribution actually comes from Optimize? And here we must have in mind that process automation is not a big bang thing. It's not a one-time project or waterfall approach. It's really an iterative thing that is happening basically every day, every week, month, or year. So it's a thing that we need to pursue constantly. This means that we are always going through these stages of designing to-be processes, implementing those processes on Camunda in order to automate them, then take those processes into production, therefore operating them, and of course realizing that we have not yet found the perfect solution. So even if the process is running technically sound and there are no errors or exceptions or things like that, it might still be a poorly designed process in the first place from a business point of view. And we need to realize that as soon as possible in order to analyze the root cause of the weak spots that we have identified and kick off the next increment of process improvement. And this is really where Optimize comes in. So Optimize completes the stack, the Camunda stack, in terms of ensuring a continuous improvement of your automated processes. So when we look at typical projects that are about process automation, they often go through these stages, and at a certain point we take the solution into production, we go live, and we're kind of happy and think, okay, now we've actually made it and can relax. But in fact, we can't, because we must make sure that that the business processes that we are running are meeting the stakeholders' expectations. And this means we need to monitor them and we need to analyze what's going on. The typical challenges here are about transparency. So in many cases, that's in my saying, the truth is buried in the source code. So there's some technical implementation that is not really visible for the business side. So business stakeholders can't really know for sure what's going on. Of course, there's documentation, and BPMN, of course, comes a long way here in order to increase this visibility. However, at the same time, we're also creating actual process data in all those executions. And those are typically buried in technical logs that you then would need to investigate or parse or process or whatever. So this is not really accessible for business stakeholder. Quite often we're seeing our customers integrating Camunda with their existing business intelligence or data warehouse products. And that is, of course, a very valid approach that we also encourage and support. So we have done this many times, and we are always happy to help doing this. And this can, in fact, be a feasible approach. However, we also hear quite often that those existing products, yeah, well, they still need to be integrated. So there's always effort involved, and there's always someone who actually owns those internal BI and data warehouse products. And we need the buy-in of those administrators, and we need access to those products, and we need to be able to actually push the data over there, implement the initial integration, then also maintain this integration constantly. When we change our processes that are running on Camunda, we need to also update this integration and things like that. So generic BI and data warehouse tools might not be the best possible approach, specifically when I want to look at the process logic and leverage that in order to understand what's going on, and also when I need to get immediate notifications when something goes out of hand. So it's not sufficient that we run a staging ETL procedure once per day or per week or per month even, if we need to be notified immediately as soon as our processes take too long or the intended outcome is not achieved or things like that. So therefore, we need to put our business in the driver's seat and let them create reports themselves, customize those reports, and those reports need to be updated in what people often call soft real time. So not necessarily within milliseconds, but within seconds at least. We need alerts that fire as soon as we're missing critical KPI, as soon as thresholds are reached, things like that, and we have to react immediately. And we need advanced analytics that help us to go from I know something is wrong to I understand why it's wrong. So this is very often about process bottlenecks that might slow the execution down because, I don't know, certain roles are understaffed, for example, or certain systems are not as available as they have to be, so things like that. And we need to figure that out as soon as possible. So this is where Optimize comes in, and the core target audience for Optimize, the core user audience is a role that we like to call process owner. A process owner is quite often not a fixed job title. So basically anyone can be a process owner. It can be a business line manager, can be a subject matter expert, it can be a project lead, can also be a technical person, an enterprise architect. It depends at the end of the day on the specific responsibility this person has towards the respective processes. So if I am in charge of making sure that our business process meet our expectations, business expectations, I am immediately the process owner, and this is when I need this kind of tool. So to summarize this, when should you consider Optimize? Well, first of all, Optimize is an add-on to the Camunda execution technology. So this means that a precondition is obviously that you are automating or planning to automate business processes with the Camunda execution technology. Then it can be very valuable, specifically when you have to make sure that those processes meet business expectations. That sounds a bit like a simple truth that goes without saying, but not necessarily. It's never black or white. As a rule of thumb, the more critical your process is to the business, the more you need to ensure these need to ensure that those expectations are actually met. So just give me an example. We look at an absence request workflow. Well, yes, of course, our employees want to know sooner rather than later if they can go on leave, and that is important. But if you compare this kind of process to, let's say, the order provisioning process of a telecommunications provider, or let's say the order execution of an e-commerce shop, or trading processes, financial service providers, that's a whole different story. So all of a sudden, the criticality is extremely high, and this is when, when Optimize becomes much more relevant. And we always want to discover and understand process performance bottlenecks, but we have to keep in mind is that quite often, once we go live for the first time with the process on Camunda, we don't really expect bottlenecks to happen right away because we are kind of up to date regarding, the transaction volume that we expect. So we can kind of anticipate if bottlenecks might occur, and we might not worry too much about it. But what we want to make sure is that we will learn immediately about those bottlenecks once they might occur. So let's say, for example, you have an insurance application process, you took that live in production, you're expecting, let's say, whatever, 1,000 applications per day if you're big in business, and you think, yes, we can handle that, that's fine. But maybe, in a half year, there might be some special campaign that the marketing department is running. And then all of a sudden you have a peak of, let's say, 10,000 or 100,000 transactions per day, all of a sudden. So you want to make sure that your process is still performing as it's expected to perform. So bottlenecks might occur, and you want to make sure that then you will be aware. And of course, as I said, if you already integrated Optimize or Camunda with your existing BI product, you might be okay anyways. But if you haven't done that yet, then of course, going with Optimize might be a more cost-effective and quicker solution because it's in fact an out-of-the-box solution. Okay, so so much about the context and the circumstances under which Optimize might make sense in your case. So what's actually there? And as I said, it's important to understand that Optimize is a web application that is part of the Camunda enterprise stack. So it is not available open source, but part of the commercially available enterprise platform of Camunda. And it is therefore part of a family of applications. So we have the modeler for creating process models and decision tables. We have task list as an inbox for your users in order to work on their tasks. We have cockpit for the technical operations, admin for administrating users and their permissions, and then we have Optimize for the aforementioned use cases. And all those applications obviously are integrated with the underlying execution engines for workflows and decisions. So this is how Optimize fits into the bigger picture. And technically, this means that Optimize talks to the Camunda engine's REST API. And this is where I would like to pull in Johannes as the tech lead, because some people asked us, how does this really work, and why is Optimize talking to the Camunda REST API instead of, for example, talk to the database directly? What's my my advantage as a user, in fact, based on this setup?
Hello everyone. Yeah, the advantage is of course that you can just use Optimize out of the box, because every engine has a REST API, or like if you have that deployed, which is in most of of our customers the case, and then the engine immediately handles all the database access, and you don't have to fiddle around like configuring stuff. The engine is already set up. Then you start Optimize. Before that, you need to configure the REST endpoint, and then you're good to go, which is the easiest way you can think of how to add Optimize to your current setup.
Thanks. So just like for my understanding, well, my understanding is basically there, but also for the audience, how does this actually work? I mean, I'm seeing Elasticsearch here. So which role does Elasticsearch play, and how can I actually, access the data that are created by the execution engine? So how does the setup work basically? How can I get up and running?
So in general, it is working that the Optimize is importing all the data that is in the engine and transforming the data to a new data structure that makes it very efficient to query the data itself, because the idea behind Optimize is, of course, that we want to query the data as fast as possible, because as Jacob already said, it's all about big data. So we have a huge amount of data and we want to get some insights. So it is very important that whenever I query the data, so I have a question and I want an answer about this data, that this is very, very fast, because you don't want to wait for a week, of course. And there we have this kind of architecture where we first we have a scheduler that starts like an import round, and we of course have to pull the data from the engine to import it, of course. Here we use a polling mechanism that is always page-based, because otherwise we would get some memory issues, and also we don't want to strain the engine too much. Of course, it's very important that the engine can work as it normally does. So there are many customers that are always worried that when there's Optimize also fetching data from the engine, then maybe the engine is not possible to run like as normally anymore, but that's not the case with this mechanism. And then, of course, we need to transform the data, and we put it in a queue, and basically we just then imported it to Elasticsearch. And there, again, like why we are using Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch makes it like very, very easy and very fast to query actually the data. Does that answer your question, Jacob?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you, Johannes. But not letting you off the hook already. So follow-up question right away. You mentioned big data and massive amounts of data. So what does this actually mean? Let's assume I'm running Camunda and I'm executing millions of process instances, whatever per month or so. So can I still look at this in Optimize? So how long do I have to wait to import this? don't I have to wait like, for ages whenever I want to learn about new activities? So I don't know if you run any tests, or if I can look that up myself maybe. So anything you can share about this?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that are very many questions. I try to answer one at a time. So I think the first question was, when you have a huge amount of data, how long does it take? So we have, of course, also some benchmarks kind of where we, for example, have a data set where we have 2 million process instances, and it takes about 4.5 hours to import that data. And yeah, so it's already a big, large data set. So whenever you have, of course, more, then it takes, of course, also more time. Most of our customers that we currently have spoken to, they have rather less, and so it's not an issue. So you can, for example, start the import whenever you start optimize, it immediately starts with the import, and then you wait for a couple of hours, and then you go to go. All the new data is immediately also imported. So if there's a new data coming into the engine, then of course Optimize realizes that and tries to fetch those. I think another question was like how long we have to wait until Optimize realizes when there's new data. Of course, it depends always a bit, but in general, it's not. I mean, you don't have to wait hours until you get an update of all the data. It can maybe takes a couple of seconds. Maybe in the worst case, you have to wait, I don't know, a couple of minutes, but usually it takes a couple of seconds. Then you have the new data, and then you're good to go to analyze everything that you want to.
Cool, thank you, Johannes. So when I now think about the data that I'm interested in as someone who's running those processes, I mean, those who are familiar with Camunda know, of course, that we execute BPMN process diagrams. So obviously, there's a process model which is key to queries as well, and reports and alerts in this case even. So we have the BPMN process model. We have the process instance information, such as the timestamps when it was started and certain activities were executed. So this is fairly straightforward. But how about the payload? I mean, there's process variables, and some of our customers, they have primitive data type variables. Will they be imported? What if I have complex objects, or maybe I just have a referral, so I have a customer ID in my process context, but my customer data are elsewhere. Can I still leverage this and optimize? And if so, how can I do this?
Yeah, good question. The answer is, of course, you can. Yeah, in Optimize, of course, you can, first, you can import all the, or it does automatically, Optimize does automatically import all the primitive variables. Then, of course, the other question is if you now have some kind of ID system, which is very often the case that you, in a variable, you don't have the value of a certain variable itself, but rather an ID pointing to somewhere, and there's the actual information. So you want to get this actual information into Optimize, and there we provide a plug-in mechanism that you can use, that you can analyze the variables Optimize is about to import. Then you can, for example, fetch all the additional data that you want to import to Optimize, enrich this variable import with that, and then this is added to Elasticsearch.
Cool. So to come back to my example, then, just envisioning this now, let's assume I have an auto execution process, and they only have the customer ID as a string variable maybe, and all the customer data are in some external database or even ERP system. So what I could do then is, in the import routine, I think you're referring to this import service and then this queue. So we have this mapping here, and what I could do is I could hook in my own Java code really, and could say, okay, customer ID is ABC. Now I for the specific process instance, now I look up the customer data, pull out, whatever what I'm interested in, like the country the customer is coming from or ordered from, and simply add this as a primitive variable then to Optimize, so that I can then use it in my queries and get all the nice reports that I'm interested in. correct, basically, right?
Yes, that's correct. So that was a very good summary, actually, what you can do with a plugin mechanism. So you kind of like in one sentence, you can just enrich the data with additional information, whatever you want to.
Cool, thanks. That's important, of course. So now come back to the end user's point of view. So once we have the data in Optimize, there's basically three things we can do about monitoring, about seeing what's going on. So we have a report builder, not just a generic report builder that you would find in any BI product, but it's a report builder that is often, of course, tailored to BPMN and to the processes you want to look at and process logic. We are able to arrange those reports in dashboards, like many dashboards, that we can then also share with others, embed in our knowledge management system, whatever, external sites. And we can define alerts that basically monitor those reports themselves. And whenever they change in a certain way, we will be notified. So this is one big element here, seeing what's going on. And the other one is, of course, analyzing what's going on, understanding why this is going on. And here, one important element, as an example, is let's say it's about pattern recognition. So there might be correlations, and one correlation that we're seeing quite often is between process variants that are expressed as dedicated branches. So we branch out in the process, we merge at a later point in the process, and this might have an impact on the process outcome. So let's say we have like a positive outcome here in the upper right corner, and maybe we have a negative outcome. So they are expressed as dedicated end events. And the question is, okay, statistically speaking, if a process takes the upper branch in the beginning versus the lower branch, might this increase or decrease the probability of the process reaching the intended outcome? So this is an abstract pattern, of course, here in this how I'm describing this, but of course there are many practical examples where we are seeing this pattern. So for example, customers requesting an offer, and then the question, do they eventually accept the offer or reject it? And this might depend on certain branches in the process. So in order to spot those situations, or to spot actually the root causes for certain impacts we observe, this kind of feature and feature set can actually come in very, very handy. So I would say let's move to a more concrete demonstration. And what I'm not going to do is show off each and every single feature of Optimize, because this would take too long, in fact. I will simply sketch the surface, demonstrate, also say tip of the iceberg, so that you get a better idea of what's actually possible. And then, of course, you can also try it out yourself. So there's a free trial. You can get in touch with us. We are happy to help you in your evaluation. So you can get all those impressions yourself in the aftermath of this webinar. The live demo is about an industry agnostic example. So it's an actually quite simple workflow, but for the purpose of demonstrating the feature set, it's actually well suited. So it's about hiring. We are a company, let's assume we are a company that is growing aggressively. So we want to hire as many people as possible. Of course, we also want to hire the best people. So therefore, there's a hiring workflow in place. Let's assume it's running on Camunda. So it's not so much an SDP, straight through processing, fully automated workflow. In this example, we're more looking at orchestrating human work, basically. So different people involved in the workflow, screening the candidates, interviewing candidates via phone, or in face-to-face meetings. And at the end of the day, we make a decision and try to hire this candidate. And if they take our offer, which they hopefully do, we have a successful outcome of this process. So when we zoom in a little bit in this example, we have to look at this BPMN process. And let me quickly walk you through it, because this will make it much easier to understand what I'm going to demonstrate. So in this example, we're receiving applications. Let's just assume, we have some form on our website and they can submit their application data, and this triggers then this process instance. So on the upper left corner, the application is received. What happens first is this here is a DMN decision task. So our decision engine automatically assigns this application to the respective hiring manager based on criteria. In some cases, this might not be possible. So we have a gateway here which says, okay, could we automatically assign the application? If yes, we can proceed right away. If not, we have to take a little detour down here. This hidden user task says that HR is supposed to assign this application to a hiring manager manually. So once this has happened, the hiring manager is supposed to screen the application first by looking at the CV, things like that. And then they are supposed to make a first decision if they want to conduct a phone interview or if they want to reject this application right away. So then we have this branch here where we simply send an email automatically and the candidate is rejected. Let's assume it's an interesting application. We do conduct the phone interview. Then we must decide, okay, do we want to continue? Do we want to invite this candidate for an on-site interview? So if not, again, we reject. If yes, we have this sub-process here because it might involve certain steps such as, finding a date and then waiting for the date to happen. Candidate comes in, we sit down, then there might be a review. So this sub-process could in fact take like a week or whatever in total, since we of course are not working on this like for the whole time. And therefore we have conducted the first on-site interview and now must decide if we want to conduct the second on-site interview. If we're already certain about the candidate, we can make the final decision right away instead, and either now reject them or actually make an offer. Then in this message event, we are waiting anxiously for the candidate to accept the offer. And if they did, we're excited and happy. And if not, then we are, of course, what we said. So obviously we have, it's kind of a funnel, we have candidates coming in on the upper left side of the process, the upper right side of the process, with a green box here marks the positive outcome of the process. Many things can go wrong in between. Most likely is that we reject the candidate, which is not too bad after all, because we of course don't want to bring in the wrong candidates. However, there's a very bad outcome of the process, which is depicted in this interrupting event sub-process here. At any given time in the process, the candidate might make up their mind and say, nah, actually found another job elsewhere, don't want to join you guys anymore. So they cancel the application basically. So this is this interrupting event sub-process, and in this case we basically lost the candidate, which is very bad of course, because we might want to bring them aboard. All right, so let's take this example and look at Optimize, how Optimize can help us monitoring and improving this process. Okay, jumping in to the live demo right away. Just waiting for. Okay, I hope you can see my screen. Okay, cool, very good. So let's log into Optimize and see what's there. And at first glance, we can see that they are obviously dashboards, or just one dashboard in this example, and a number of reports. So let's look at the dashboard first, because I've already prepared this basically. So very simple dashboard about the hiring process. And there's a number of things that we can see here. And I will quickly walk you through that. So I've just created some reports and arranged them in a dashboard. And then I will explain how this basically works. So we can see, for example, the hires we have made this year already, like 31. We also see here in this bar chart the number of applications that we have received this year per day so far. So lots of applications, obviously. What we can also see is down there how long it took on average per month to get to the initial rejection in the process model. So we remember that, we screen the candidates and then we might decide to reject them right away. So the question is, okay, how long did it take on average to get to this point? And we can see it here. So in January, for example, it took on average about a week. Then in February, it took all of a sudden more than 2 weeks on average, or 3 weeks in fact. And in March, then we accelerated significantly, and it took only 3 days on average. So again, this is information that we can have here. We also have 2 other reports which leverage the BPMN diagram in combination with a feature called Heatmap. So there's different ways to leverage that. For example, here we can see the steps that were executed most often so far. So when I zoom in a little bit, I can see that, you know, more than 8,000 applications came in total that we're looking at. And then we see this, you know, this funnel logic that many are weeded out quite early in the process, and only a few get through to the on-site interview stage. And then only a few actually received an offer, and then only a few actually accepted that offer. So again, we can already see where, you know, the highest activity actually is in the process, and not surprisingly, it's in this first branch where we decide, okay, interesting application, but not interesting enough, so let's reject. Another typical heat map that we have here is about duration. So how long does it take on average to complete certain steps in the process? And here we can see that one part is glowing red right now, which is this sub-process conducting the first on-site interview, which takes on average 2 weeks, a little more than 2 weeks. Not surprisingly, of course, since, as I said, we're scheduling a date, we're waiting for the date to actually happen, etc. So the total cycle time is a bit more than 2 weeks, and that is not a surprise. Which might be a bit more surprising there is that it takes actually more than 4 days on average to screen the application in the first place and decide if we want to have a phone conversation. So letting the candidate wait for 4 days might not be an actually great idea. We will come back to that later, of course. All right. So maybe before we dive into this dashboard logic a bit more, let's look at the process. So at the reports. Sorry. So how does this actually work? And as you can see here, there's different kinds of reports. So obviously, there's different kinds of information that we can ask for in different ways to visualize that information. And to explain this a bit better, maybe let's just look at this case that candidates canceled. Something that we really don't like to happen. So as you can see here, in total, 2,000 candidates canceled their application in total so far. So this is a bad thing, and maybe we want to look at this a bit more, and also make sure that we are aware if this cancellation rate actually goes up, and we might have a bigger problem in the process we want to look at right away. So what I can do now is I can create simply a new report. So let's just jump to the reports section and say create new report. And what I'm going to do now is create a report which is about candidate canceled. And first I will select the process that I want to look at. So in this case, it's the hiring demo process, the BPMN diagram that we are already familiar with. We can now look at the specific version of a process. Those of you who are familiar with Camunda know that we always execute versions, and you can therefore make sure that your data stays consistent, etc. But maybe you want to actually look at all versions as a bundle. You don't want to depend on a certain version to look at. So what I can say is I want to look at all versions. Well, in this case, there's just one, but still. And as the next step, I can decide what I actually want to look at. So for example, I want to look at the number of process instances, which is in fact the case. Each application is technically speaking a process instance. So now I'm interested in the number of process instances, which I will simply look at a simple number. So it's visualized now as a number, but now I will apply a filter, because I'm only interested in the process instances that ended with the state candidate has canceled. So what I can apply now is a filter, and there's different filters that are available to narrow down the data set that I'm interested in. So in this case, I want to apply the so-called flow node filter, where I can say I only want to look at process instances that went through a certain flow node. A flow node can be a task, a gateway, an event. So in my example, I only want to look at process instances that went through this event sub-process, because in that case, the candidate canceled, obviously. So now I add this filter. I narrowed this down now to the almost 2,000 instances that we already noticed in the heat map. And now I might also want to say, well, not like all over the time, like for the whole time, because when I do that, I can just quickly do that. I can say, okay, I want to group by, for example, by day, and want to look at a bar chart, and now it will display, all the process instances that ended up because the candidate canceled per day for the total time, which goes all the way back to 2016. So this is not what I'm necessarily interested in right now. So I do not need to group. I simply want to look at the symbol number, and only for applications that came in this year. So now I apply a different filter, which is the start date. And I can now say, okay, I only want to look at process instances that were started in a specific time frame, and I can just pick that here with a date picker, but I can also use a shortcut here which says this year, and once I apply that, it's not that many process instances anymore, but still good number. So now let's make sure that we always stay on top of things, and I'm not just looking at the number of candidates we lost this year, but let's say in the past, let's say 60 days, for example. So what I can do now is I can adjust this date filter from a fixed date frame to a relative date. And this means I will, for example, say process instances that started in the past 60 days, and now it will always narrow this down to process instances that started in the past 60 days, depending on when I open this report. So obviously I could also say past 7 days, open it every Monday or whatever, and get an accurate number for the past 7 days. Okay, let's save this report. What I could do now is I could add this report to my dashboard. So let's go back to the dashboard and say, okay, I would like to edit this now because I want to add a new report. So I go in edit mode. So I'm now able to move these reports around or make them bigger or smaller or whatever. And I can also add an additional report, which is the lost candidates report I just created. Here we go. Maybe like this. Okay. All right. So I just created a report and added it to my dashboard. Speaking of dashboards now again, maybe I want to make this information accessible to others in my organization. So there's different ways to do this. For example, I can say I want to share this dashboard. And this means that I first have to enable sharing. So as you can see, this little toggle. If this is not toggled on, then this report or this dashboard would not be accessible if I'm not logged into Optimize. Right now, sharing is already enabled. So for example, there's a link that is generated that I can simply copy and paste and send to my peers, and then they can look at this dashboard even if they're not logged in. So when I now go to the incognito mode of my browser and I open this link, I will get a read-only view of this dashboard, of course, with always the most up-to-date information. Another way of sharing this is embedding the dashboard. Embedding means that there's this little snippet here, and I can simply copy the snippet and paste it into any given website in order to embed this dashboard in another website. So this could, for example, be, let's say, Atlassian Confluence, where I want to let people access the dashboard without logging into Optimize, but they still have to log in, Atlassian Confluence, for example, and put it in the right place. So I did this here already, and it's super simple. So it's just this, the snippet. So when I edit this page, I just have to paste it in here, and then it's accessible. And you can see here that I'm in my personal space on Confluence, and I simply embedded this dashboard. And as you can see here, my report that I just created is, of course, also displayed. So it's, again, always up to date, obviously. People can even like this if they want to. All right. So obviously, there's a lot I can do with these dashboards as well. I can enter full screen mode, like in order to put it on the TV screen. I can auto refresh this dashboard like every minute, and then I always have this information available in my room or however I want to leverage this. All right, this way of sharing dashboards is also available, of course, for single reports. So also I can share read-only links to my reports or embed my reports in Confluence, etc. So that's, of course, also possible. Okay, so I need to hurry up a bit, I think. So looking at this matter of making sure that the process behaves in the way that it's supposed to behave, let's just quickly look into this matter of candidates who cancel. So I will simply open this report here right now, This is now the total date frame. So in total, we had those 2,000 candidates almost who canceled. And what I could do now is, of course, I could, go from here and try to figure out why they have canceled. So what's the problem? What can I do about this in order to reduce this negative outcome of my process? And there's different ways to look at this. Now more, talking about analyzing the situation rather than just monitoring it. So for example, I can say, okay, let's only look at the instances that went through this part. So again, I can apply my flow node filter. Now I can see where many candidates dropped out. So apparently, we came to this part where we screen the application, and many canceled already when we came to this step. So we're now only looking at applications that we didn't reject but that canceled, and you see the significant drop from this step to this step. So it looks a bit like we might have an issue here coming to this point. This issue might be related to duration. Maybe it's simply taking too long. Maybe they're annoyed by waiting for us to come back to them. This would back up my initial thoughts about the 4 days that this takes on average. Just displaying this again. So I can now switch from counting the flow node frequency to displaying the average flow node duration. And again, we have those 4 days here. So maybe, there's a potential correlation here, and maybe this is simply taking too long. We also have the situation that, in some cases, we had a detour where the hiring manager had to assign the application, the HR department had to assign the application to a hiring manager. So maybe this also has an impact, although it only takes 4 hours. So let's first look at these 4 days here. And what we could do, for example, in order to, maybe have an impact and say, guys, maybe we should get back to the candidate a bit quicker than in 4 days. What we can do is we can set target values like SLAs for these steps. So I can say now, okay, I want to define a target value for this step, because right now it looks a bit like our problem was here, because this is a glowing red rectangle, glowing red box with the 2 weeks. And this here actually looks quite okay. But maybe this is misleading visualization. So therefore, we might want to put this into perspective of what is acceptable and what isn't. So I can set a target value, and I could say, okay, well, the conduct on-site interview thing, it's okay if that takes, 2 weeks, for example. So let's set this even as a target value and say 2 weeks on average. That's basically okay. But the screen application thing, that shouldn't take longer than a day at most. So let's put in a day here and set this as a target value. And all of a sudden, we get an entirely different picture, obviously. So now we are like way above what's acceptable in terms of SLA for this specific step, and we can now again constantly monitor that and actually see if this behaves differently, for example, for certain positions that we're hiring for. So coming to this element that Johannes mentioned about variables, we might say we only want to look at applications for tech positions like software developers and DevOps engineers. How could we do that? We could apply an additional filter, which is about variables. And we could say, okay, let's only look at process instances with a variable position that the candidate applied for. And this is now a string variable, but Optimize makes it very convenient for me as a business user to pick the values that I'm interested in. So now I can simply select DevOps engineer and software developer, and I will only look at process instances or at applications for those 2 positions. So doing this now, and apparently this, well, we're actually a bit better here. So well, for those 2 positions, it doesn't take 4 days on average, but 3 days, but we're still obviously way above the acceptable target value. So again, now we can monitor this. We can save this as a different report. We can present this and so on and so forth. There's another thing that we can do, which is define an alert. So let's say, for example, this report about the candidates that cancel in the past 60 days. Maybe we say well, 529 is still acceptable, but if this goes above, let's say 600, I want to get an email right away. How does this work? Well, I can define an alert that says, okay, I want to send an email to whatever, my email address. I will not do this now for time reasons. I can select the report I'm interested in, for example, candidates canceled. I can define a threshold. For example, as soon as this report, produces a result which is above 600, and we check this every 10 minutes or every 10 seconds, I want to get an email. And I also want to get a reminder, like every 2 hours, if this keeps being the case, or I want to get a notification if we have fixed this and we are below that threshold again. We can do this for reports that produce simple numbers. We can also do it for reports that produce, time, like duration, for example, things like that. All right. Yeah, speaking of time, we're actually running out of time. So I will not live demo the last feature I wanted to demo, actually, which is about the analysis. But you can actually have a look at that yourself when you check out the description page on the website for Optimize. And you scroll down, it's called Analyzing Process Variance. And you can see here, I think I also opened it here already, that we are able to even spot correlations between process variance and outcomes of the process in order to back up or falsify certain hypotheses. Like for example, is it a problem when we assign an application manually to a hiring manager? Is the likeliness that, or probability that the candidate cancels higher in those cases? Which is, by the way, actually the case, as we can see here. All right, good. Now, jumping back to the presentation and quickly wrapping this up. What's coming next? I mean, I really just scratched the surface. There's a lot more to do with Optimize, and this is why I strongly encourage you to check it out yourself. But we are, of course, not yet done. So for now, we focused on this first part of the overall product vision, which is all about seeing what's going on. I want to see what's happening. We only implemented like a few first features that we like to put in the understand cluster. I don't just want to see what's going on. I want to understand why this is happening. So here we are in the area of assisted analytics, which includes pattern recognition and also, of course, machine learning and AI. And I don't like to, do this buzzword thing where you claim this is a AI product and we're AI all over the place. Our own engineers who are very, very familiar with AI say, hey, we're just again scratching the surface here. There's much more to come because we have the data, we have the process logic at hand. We can actually apply ML and AI patterns here in a much more powerful way. So this is something that you can expect from Optimize in the midterm, let's say the next 6 to 18 months to the next major releases, basically. And the long-term vision is that we will actually enable the process owner as a business stakeholder to really directly change the structure of process execution on the fly. Let that be about decision tables that I adjust. I can already do that in Cockpit, but also BPMN process models that I want to adjust. So here's, of course, a lot to consider in terms of test automation, simulation, making sure that business users do not accidentally break anything. So we don't take this, this is not something that you should take lightly. It's a very mission critical, again, endeavor to make sure that process owners are able to improve directly, but at the same time, minimizing the risk of them breaking things in production. So this is what you can expect in the long term, the next 2 to 3 years from Optimize, based on what we now created as a foundation. Next steps. What should you do? What should you do now in order to leverage Optimize? First, be aware when it is most powerful, and it's most powerful once you go live with your process application and you want to prove that you actually created value with your project. So you need to prove success. This is a slide taken from our IT executive coaching, where we help IT managers VP of engineering, software developer, team leads, whatever, to strategically benefit from Camunda. And it's extremely important that once you've implemented your first project, you can prove with numbers that it actually made sense, that you met the initial motivation. So this is where Optimize is super powerful to actually, provide this backup, this proof to any stakeholder that is interested that this project made sense. Based on this, you will get the buy-in for the next projects. So therefore, it makes sense to set Optimize up, of course, long before you go live, because you want to make sure that that your process models are also designed in a way that makes it easy to run reports and alerts and analytics on them. So have this in mind from the get-go and start talking to us before you actually start developing anything. But in terms of when you actually use Optimize, that is typically once you go live. What we can do for you is we can conduct a workshop, and this is really just one possible flavor. So it can be a one-day workshop where one of our consultants comes on site, introduces Camunda Optimize to your stakeholders, sets it up together with you, enables you to actually import and analyze your own Camunda data like right away, and also educates you about best practices for using Camunda Optimize. This can be a one-day workshop that includes technical as well as business stakeholders. Of course, you can also expand that and say, hey, I would like to have whatever, like 2 days workshop only with the business, 2 days workshop only with tech, or vice versa. So all variants are basically possible. But if you want to get a lot of information, a lot of progress in a very efficient way, even a one-day workshop is certainly feasible. So feel free to reach out to us. It's on our price list. We can make you like an offer right away and make this available to you. And we're really happy to work together with you on getting the best out of Optimize for your own process automation endeavor. All right, yeah, sorry, I had to hurry up at the end a little bit, as always. So I'm not sure if we received many questions, so I will simply look at the window. Johannes, I don't know, I think you also had a look at that. Are there any questions that you actually want to answer yourself right away?
Yes, there are 2 questions that can already answer immediately. There's a question: how long does it take for Optimize to import this, like a large data set, like 2 million process instances? Yeah, we already, as I said, we already have a benchmark for that. That's taking on a regular laptop, so it's not like a setup super machine. It's just a regular laptop that takes about 4.5 hours, and yeah, so you can definitely expect more if you have a proper setup there. There's another question which is very interesting about roles and groups and assigning tasks and alerts. So right now, Optimize does not have any permission or access management. So in the terms that you can define that someone can create a report or an alert that the other one cannot see. So like everyone that has access to Optimize right now can see everything. But of course, we are listening to customer feedback, and we already got a couple of times that many customers are requesting that there's some kind of access management. So like, for example, that only a couple of users can see certain process definitions instead of all the definitions or all the reports. And we want to tackle that actually in the next release. And yeah, maybe also Jacob can say more about that.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. So 2.0 is out right now, and 2.1 is already like in the making. So this means that we're working on Optimize 2.1 now in the second quarter, And here we will tackle a number of things, but one of them is a sophisticated way of managing access permissions to reports, dashboards, and so on. So of course, right now, you cannot just like open Optimize. You need to have a user in order to log in. You manage that user in Camunda admin, so it's all well integrated and connected. But as Johannes elaborated, there's no you cannot differentiate between optimized users. So any optimized user can access any report right now. And of course, you'll probably want to have more flexibility here. So this is coming up, and 2.1 it's not going to take a year or anything. So we have scheduled 2.1 for the second quarter. So this is what we're aiming at. End of Q2, beginning of July, that should be available. As always, things might be delayed, but we're typically quite good when it comes to keeping our deadlines. So therefore, I'm relatively confident about that.
There's another question. If we have history level as none, can we still create reports from Optimize? No, that's not the case. Of course, if you want to analyze the data and you want to, of course, as Jakob said, we're analyzing the history data, then of course you need the history level full, because what we need is the data about the process instances, the activity instance, the variable instances. Otherwise, of course, we cannot import any data, and then we can also not perform any analysis, or you can visualize any or create any report based on that. Jakob, do you have another question there? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe also just quickly adding an answer here. So that's a very good question. You know, we have many customers who run like enormous amounts of transactions on Camunda, and what they often do is they connect the data in the database, in the history database, and now they're increasingly using a feature that we released a while ago, which is called history cleanup, so that you can automatically basically delete the history data in the database to free up space, etc. Make sure that you're not running into performance issues. That's a very common pattern. And what Optimize can do, and again with 2.1, this is actually another big thing that we are right now working on. You can leverage Optimize in the sense that you can constantly import the created data from the history database and store it and keep it in Optimize while cleaning up the Camunda database in short intervals. So as Johannes mentioned, importing new data from the engine into Optimize like in a second is not an uncommon pattern or use case. So that's certainly possible. And then of course you can combine these features in order to leverage history data in Optimize without running into performance or storage issues on your relational database. Another question, very quickly, someone's asking how to get support for Optimize. Does it cover Elasticsearch as well? Yes, Optimize is, as I mentioned earlier, part of the Camunda Enterprise platform. So as soon as you're an enterprise customer, you get, of course, support for all the Camunda components, including Optimize. And there's 2 distros of Optimize, one without Elasticsearch included, one including Elasticsearch. So the reasoning here is that if you already have Elasticsearch and you want to, store the data in the existing repository, you can use Optimize with that. If you don't have it and you don't want to care about Elasticsearch, you can use the out-of-the-box distro. And what we do, of course, is that we say, hey, Optimize, you can use Optimize. We say that you will not run into issues with Optimize because of Elasticsearch. If you do, we have to take care of that. Of course, we're not like the company Elastic, so we don't support Elasticsearch in each and every way. But as far as it's concerning Optimize with the version that we deliver as part of the distro, yes, of course, we have your back. To the engineer, you have to deliver on that. Would you disagree, Johannes?
No, that's a good summary of that, because of course we cannot give support for every Elasticsearch version, and that's also not what Optimize is of course about. And we just ensure, of course, we have a lot of tests. We ensure that with certain Elasticsearch versions, Optimize is running perfectly fine. With others, we cannot, of course, not guarantee that's the case. So, of course, we give certain guarantees, and for those guarantees, we also, of course, give support. So if there's any issue, that might occur with those like setups, then of course we are there for you as always. You can just create a support case and then we will handle this issue. Is there another question, or is the time already? Is the time up? Yeah. All right, then I hand over to Jacob again.
Yeah, I mean, hey, not much for me to say. Besides that, we would really love to see you guys using this. We're super keen to help you using Optimize. So reach out anytime, and we'll jump on a call with you, answer your questions, do POC with you. So this is really exciting milestone for us. And yeah, getting some positive feedback here right now. One last question. Someone's asking from which Camunda version this is available. I think it's 7.7, right? Okay, getting nods here. So again, please reach out, ask more questions, but we need to wrap this up as of today. So thanks a lot for your time today and interest. Thanks a lot to Johannes and of course Daya as well for hosting this. And yeah, any final words, Daya, logistically speaking?
Yeah, just wanted to say thank you again from all of us, and just a reminder that we'll send you an email tomorrow with the webinar recording, and we'll also put in there how you guys can get in touch with us. So thanks again for your time, and we hope you have a great day.